professionals. Peter is working on a book that's coming out soon, which will be called A Manual for Creating Atheists. Here's Dr. Peter Boghossian.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone. It's a true pleasure to be here, and I'm incredibly grateful. I'm incredibly grateful for the work of the FFRF, and I'm incredibly grateful for you here today. The former speakers talked about an audience full of their best friends. That's kind of how I feel. I feel that I'm among my people. I'm among people who I like and I respect, so thank you. I also wanted to say thank you for the work that you do in your communities to make them more thoughtful and more rational. The introduction is correct. I have over 2.5 decades of teaching in the prisons, in crowded public universities, and in the streets. And what I do is, I call it street epistemology. One lesson I've learned in this is walking the talk, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. What would it take for you to believe? Well, to believe in what? What would it take for you to believe in a particular religion? What would it take for you to be a believing Christian? Or what would it take for you to believe that the wafer that Catholics use in communion is the physical body of Christ? From a wafer it transmutes into human flesh. Or that women should be put in cloth bags and occasionally beaten. What would it take you to believe that through faith, Jesus Christ can heal people of any and all ailments? Or that the Easter Bunny is a real entity that hides colored eggs? Or that my drawing of an Easter Bunny is actually an artistic masterpiece? Or that you'll go to a happy place after you die? Why is it important to answer the question, what would it take for you to believe? There are 2 reasons. It's important so that we don't become what we're fighting: doggedly certain, closed-minded, epistemologically arrogant, dogmatic, and religious. Being genuinely open to revise or to change your beliefs is an attitudinal disposition. The American Philosophical Association's Delphi report on critical thinking noted, willingness to revise a belief is a core attitudinal component of an ideal critical thinker. Being trustful of reason is another component. Being able to state explicitly what it would take for you to believe or disbelieve in a particular proposition creates spaces, cognitive spaces, openness in your beliefs. Even thinking about a way to answer this question may help you to hold your beliefs less tenaciously. In philosophy, there's a term, doxastic closure. It's an esoteric term even among seasoned philosophers. It's a technical term, and I use it in a way that's percolated into public discourse. Doxastic derives from the ancient Greek doxa. It's an interesting word and has many different meanings. It basically means belief. But one meaning of doxa is how things look to me, how things appear to me. If someone is doxastically closed, that means that their beliefs are immune to revision. One can be doxastically closed about any belief, that is, one can be unwilling or unable to revise what they believe. But doxastic pathologies are particularly ubiquitous in the realm of faith and religion. By the way, my current research area, I'm looking at small mini dialectical interventions with people to help separate faith from its host, to help people to lose their faith and to become more rational and more reasonable. The second reason being able to answer this question is important is because it helps us to model the behavior that we want the faithful to emulate. If we want the faithful to be less doggedly certain, less closed-minded, less epistemologically arrogant, less dogmatic, less religious, then this is the behavior that we need to model. Also, if we want the faithful to be trustful of reason and willing to revise their beliefs, then we need to show them this by example. There's an entire line of literature on change and modeling behavior. Sometimes it's referred to as prosocial modeling. It shows that modeling is a key component to elicit behavior change. One of my favorite questions to ask people to ask believers is a variation of Matt McCormick's defeasibility test. What would it take you to lose your faith? What would it take you to lose your faith? This is a reasonable question, and when I ask it, I expect a clear answer. It's also a diagnostic tool that enables me to quickly ascertain the degree that one is doxastically closed. But beyond this, when I'm asked what it would take for me to have faith or to believe in God, I respond that these are reasonable questions. I always give a direct, blunt, and honest answer. In order for us to ask this question, we must first make sure that we've asked it of ourselves. We must take a dose of our own medicine. I would never hold a person of faith to a different epistemic standard than I would hold myself, and neither should you. At this particular juncture, I want to be clear that there are obviously no guarantees. Just because one can state what it would take them to believe or disbelieve a particular proposition, that doesn't mean that they're suddenly experience some doxastic openness and be willing to revise their beliefs. Sometimes we engage someone who's argued poorly for their position, but because of dialectical training, we can immediately think of a counter-argument to offer for the same conclusion, or a better argument, a much stronger argument. We should provide people with arguments for their conclusions that are even better than the ones they've offered. When I'm having a discussion about faith, I don't want to have a conversation with a straw man. I want to have a conversation with a real person who's given me powerful arguments that have emerged from their experiences. And if they can't provide that, then I'll provide it for them. One of the strengths of philosophical training is that it enables you to do this. It's also one of the strengths that comes from leading an examined life. This is the thing that we should try to model. This is another component of street epistemology. Having a closed belief system is an incredibly complex problem, but one part of the problem is that our brains trick us into thinking that we're open-minded. Michael Shermer has some wonderful work in The Believing Brain in which he talks about this. Our brains trick us into thinking that we're willing to revise our beliefs, that we're willing to reconsider when we're not. Confirmation bias is a part of this. We have a natural predisposition to go with our own ideas, to go with the way things appear to us. But we get stuck in appearances. We confirm our own biases. An example of this would be the bones of Christ. Whenever I ask someone of faith, a Christian, what would it take you to lose your faith? Often I'm struck when they say the bones of Christ. I used to believe that when people said that to me, they weren't being sincere. I no longer believe that. I think that's a result of a different sort of epistemological pathology. Look, let's say that I had a bag, and I brought a bag in here, and instead of this conference, this is, the apologist conference. It'd be funny to invite me to that. So they bring a bag in here, and I plop the bag on the table, and I say, these are the bones of Christ. There it is. I went to Jerusalem, had a great time, archaeological dig. Fantastic. Those bones would be examined with far more scrutiny than what the faithful use to believe their current set of beliefs about Jesus and the resurrection. They would do everything to falsify that claim. This shows that the problem of why people hold preposterous beliefs is not a matter of a skill set. It's not because they lack critical thinking skills or because they don't know that their beliefs are absurd. It's a matter of attitude. The faithful don't have the appropriate attitudinal dispositions like a trustfulness of reason and a willingness to revise their beliefs. This is also why we need to help them to break through these delusions by modeling the behavior in ourselves. You may be thinking that I've placed an undue burden upon you. I'm asking too much. There are just too many issues, too many ideas for one to consider what it would take to change one's beliefs on all of these issues. I don't think it's an undue burden. I think this is what it means to live a thoughtful and examined life. the ability to reason through problems, to evaluate evidence, to generate counterexamples, to clearly state why we believe or don't believe, to revise your beliefs, to use the results to inform our decisions to make better lives and form better communities. I'm not arguing that this is something that has to be immediate. Someone asks you a question, what would it take for you to believe? If you don't know, you just say, I don't know. I don't know. Let me think about it, and I'll come back to you. An indispensable goal is to be free from poor thinking, bad reasoning, faulty epistemologies, and free from the attitudes that lead to religion. What's not important is to be an atheist. It is important to be a person who trusts reason, who formulates their beliefs on the basis of reliable evidence, and who's genuinely willing to reconsider. Atheism is a natural consequence of possessing these skills and attitudes. Yet one could be an atheist and not possess these skills and dispositions. That is, one could be a doxastically closed atheist. This should not be an intellectual or attitudinal aspiration. Atheism is not an immutable, timeless truth. Atheism is a conclusion. It's a conclusion one comes to based upon an honest and thoughtful examination of reasons and evidence. In the next slide, I've compiled a comprehensive historical and contemporary list of all of the evidence and all of the reasons that one should consider when examining whether or not there's a God or gods. There is no evidence. Nada. Zip. Nothing. And this is why I don't believe in God. It's not for ideological reasons. Dan mentioned D'Souza. Just saw D'Souza's debate recently. It's not because D'Souza says because we're angry. I'm not angry. Dan, are you angry? We don't believe in God because there's a complete lack of evidence. But this shouldn't deter us from providing answers as to what it would take to believe. To believe in God, to believe in leprechauns, or to believe in any other propositions. So let's revisit the questions, the issues that we've looked at this morning that I've mentioned, and I will honestly say what it would take for me to believe in these things. God. Physicist Lawrence Krauss has an interesting debate with William Lane Craig. And he says, look, if God wanted you to believe in its existence, you'd walk outside, you'd look up at the sky, and there it would be, and the stars would realign themselves and say something like, I am God, believe in me. Well, if that happened to me, I would doubt my sanity. I would think that somehow I was the victim of a delusion or LSD, one of my students spiked my coffee. David Hume, the philosopher David Hume, has an interesting comment on miracles. He says that there's stronger reason to doubt the testifier than to trust the testimony. I'm not sure I would trust this perception. And it may be that no perception or no feeling state would lead me to conclude that God exists. Instead, I would need argument or reason. But let's suspend that for a moment and go with the example. What would it take for me personally to believe in God? Well, the stars spelling things out to people in different languages would be interesting. You know, some look Arabic, they look, I am God, believe in me in Arabic. But I'd also want predictions. I'd want, I don't know, something about the future, someone to solve Goldbach's conjecture. I'd want something that I could latch my hands onto. But the purpose of this talk isn't to give a complete account of what constitutes warranted belief. I don't have enough time. But these are the things I have in mind. This is the way that I would approach the problem. These are the tools that I would bring to bear on how to think through the problem. The communion wafer. That the communion wafer transforms into the body of Christ. I'm actually going to compile this with the next one of faith healing. We can turn the tools of science on these questions very easily. And we could take a look. There's a famous line, why doesn't God heal amputees? The tools of science are quite easy in these cases. What is more difficult is when we enter the moral realm. What would it take me to believe that we should put half of our population in cloth bags and beat them? Well, this is an astonishingly difficult question. If I could be shown that my core value of gender and racial egalitarianism was a cultural artifact, and that somehow forcing women into bags and beating them was actually in their own interest and somehow contributed to the well-being of society, that would really be something. Or maybe if I could be shown that I was harboring a mistaken view about reality in regard to women. Maybe, for example, if they were malevolent entities, some kind of extraterrestrials bent on destroying humanity. But this is the sort of evidence that one would need to warrant belief in these claims. Regardless of the specific belief that's being examined, in all of the cases, what's important is to sincerely think about answering the question, what would it take for you to believe? This is a way that we can nudge ourselves to think more clearly and more rationally. Just stating that we're willing to revise our beliefs if shown sufficient evidence or if given sufficient reason is not enough. We must be able to state exactly what it would take for us to believe or to disbelieve a given proposition. We need to model the change that we want to see in the faithful. There's a lot of work to be done to help people to lose their faith and to embrace reason and rationality. This is one step in that direction. It's possible for virtually everyone to lead a life free of delusion. To facilitate this, think back to one of the definitions of belief from the Greek. We need to move from appearance and opinion to knowledge. We also need to model the attitudes that are necessary to provide people with hope. But the hope we offer is a tough hope. It's not born of platitudes. It won't make you feel better right away. But it takes away a false view of reality and offers a genuine hope, a hope that's based on reason and rationality and the tools of science, a hope that your own efforts of thoughtfulness and an examined life will help contribute to that, a hope offered through walking the talk. Thank you.